Your fuel isn't vanishing. It's being quietly stolen by a sensor your dash won't warn you about. If your MPG dropped and there's no check engine light, you're likely driving in permanent warm-up mode. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In the next minutes, I'll show you the hidden enemy rank order. What to clean first, IAT and MAF for quick 3 to 4 miles per gallon wins. What to inspect next, MAP, and the one that overrides them all, the coolant temp sensor that can force a 10 to 15% richer burn. Stay to see the $10 cleaning method that can save you a $500 visit. Did your fuel economy slide a few points with no check engine light? Start 2 inches from the airbox. The first quiet theft happens where the ECU gets its most basic truth: how much air you're actually feeding the engine and how hot that air is. When the intake air temperature sensor and the mass airflow sensor are coated with a thin film, the computer makes conservative calls that feel safe but cost you gas every mile. You don't get an alert because the numbers aren't broken, they're just skewed enough to make the car dull and thirsty. The ECU acts on the world it sees through those sensors. If the IAT reads hotter than reality, the computer assumes less dense air. It trims spark and tames throttle response to avoid knock. If the MAF reports lower airflow than what's really entering, the ECU commands less fuel. On paper, that looks lean, so you push deeper on the pedal to get the same acceleration. Now the trims chase your foot, timing falls back, and the engine spends more time in the sluggish zone. No codes, just a creeping penalty every time you merge or climb a hill. IAT drift is simple physics. The little thermistor tip sits in the airstream. A mist of PCV oil and dust sticks to it and acts like a jacket. Insulated like that, it warms up, then cools down more slowly, so it keeps telling the ECU the air is warmer than it is. Warmer air means less oxygen per volume, so the computer eases ignition advance and throttle mapping to prevent detonation. You feel a softer tip-in, a lazier pull under 3,000 RPM, and the need to press more to get the same response. Finding it is easy. Many cars have the IAT pushed into the intake tube with a small clip. Others build it into the MAF housing itself. Either way, the safe method is the same. Disconnect the plug. If it's separate, twist it out gently. Use an electronic safe cleaner and miss the sensing element. Don't touch it, don't wipe it, and don't rush it. Set it aside and let air do the drying. Now the MAF. That thin platinum wire or film needs to know exactly how fast air is moving. Over-oiled reusable filters and airborne grime leave a sticky layer that changes how heat leaves the element. The sensor sees less cooling and thinks less air is coming in. The ECU underfuels. You compensate with your right foot, and fuel economy drops while drivability goes woolly. The idle can feel glassy one day and fuzzy the next because the readings wander. Technique matters here. Use a dedicated MAF cleaner. Skip brake or carb cleaner. Those can leave residue or attack plastics and coatings. No brushes, no cotton swabs, no compressed air blasts. Short bursts across the element from different angles, then flip the housing and repeat from the backside. Hit the temperature probe if it's integrated. Let it dry fully. A wet MAF can read wildly wrong for the first few minutes and throw you off the scent. If you like proof, plug in a scan tool before and after. You might see long-term fuel trim at idle and cruise sitting around plus 10% beforehand. After cleaning, that number can settle near plus 2%. That drop lines up with a steadier idle, stronger low RPM torque, and the feeling that the car wakes up with a lighter touch. Many drivers report a 3 to 4 miles per gallon gain within a tank, which means a $10 can just paid for itself and saved a trip to a shop that would start with the same steps. If the throttle now feels crisp but your mileage still trails, or you notice a new hesitation under load, the next sensor upstream may be muting the ECU's sense of engine load. What if the sensor calling the shots doesn't throw a light, but quietly keeps you in rich burn mode anyway? This is where the real drain hides, because one bad decision upstream can undo everything else you fixed. You've cleaned the airflow side, so now we deal with the signals that decide how much fuel you get and when the engine is allowed to lean out. 3 players matter here: MAP, the upstream O2, and the coolant temperature sensor that acts like a master switch. Start with the chain of authority. The MAP sensor refines engine load by tracking manifold vacuum, so the ECU knows how hard the engine is working. The upstream O2 sits in the exhaust and trims the mixture in real time by reporting how close you are to stoichiometric. But the coolant temperature sensor decides when the ECU exits warm-up and goes into proper closed-loop control. If that call is wrong, the other two can only react inside bad boundaries. Here's the catch. A slightly contaminated ECT tip or a thermostat that lingers open can say the engine isn't warm, even after you've been driving. The ECU holds richer targets longer to protect the engine, stretching that 10 to 15% fuel hit far beyond the first minutes of a drive. Because the reading looks plausible, you may never see a code. You just get heavier fuel use, a soft throttle, and a car that feels fine until you check your receipts. Now to MAP. On many engines, especially direct injection setups, a tiny sensing port in the MAP collects carbon. That buildup slows how fast vacuum changes reach the sensor. The computer sees load late, so you tip in, get a stumble, then a surge as it overcorrects. That seesaw wastes fuel and makes the car feel inconsistent around town. At highway speeds, it can mean small hunting motions you feel through the pedal. You can test and fix this in minutes. Pull the MAP from the manifold. Look into the port and the little passage on the sensor head. If you see dark, gummy residue, that's your restriction. Use electronics cleaner only, short mists to dissolve buildup. Let it air dry. Inspect the O-ring. If it's flat, cracked, or leaves oil marks, replace it. A leaky O-ring becomes a vacuum leak, raises idle, and skews fueling because unmetered air sneaks in past the seal. Next is the lazy upstream O2. When new, it switches fast, multiple times per second, letting the ECU correct mixture in tight steps. As miles add up, oil ash, sulfur, and silicones slow that switching. The ECU starts chasing a moving target, often drifting rich for stretches that burn extra fuel and heat the catalytic converter. You won't always feel it as a misfire. You pay for it at the pump and later in exhaust repairs. Cleaning an O2 rarely restores the speed you need and can leave residues on the sensing surface. If your upstream O2 sensor is original past the 100,000-mile mark, replacement is smart money. The gains in stable trims and steady cruise can pay back in a few tanks, and you protect the catalyst from thermal stress caused by extra fuel. Finally, make the master call with the ECT. On a cold start, compare ECT to ambient or intake air temperature on a scan tool. They should match closely. Time how long it takes to enter closed loop and watch the temperature rise. If it stalls low or drops on the move, suspect a stuck-open thermostat or a drifting sensor. A cool lie locks you into permanent warm-up behavior, and every trip becomes a slow leak. Fix those two, ECT behavior and a sluggish upstream O2, and you stabilize trims, cut that 10 to 15% penalty, and stop cooking the catalytic converter. With MAP restored and the master switch honest, you've rebuilt the ECU's judgment. Now turn this into a habit. Quick cleanings at each oil change, plus timely sensor replacements. Keep your fuel use in check and your throttle feel consistent. Tiny films on tiny sensors drain wallets. Clean data brings back timing, trims, and miles per gallon. Start simple today. Pull the intake tube, clean the IAT and MAF with proper electronic safe sprays. Let them air dry and reinstall. Inspect the MAP port and O-ring, then confirm warm-up on a scan tool. ECT should match ambient on cold start and enter closed loop quickly. If your upstream O2 has high miles, replace it before it cooks the catalyst. Track L, TFT, and MPG over your next tank to see the change. Still wasting fuel? Next, we'll expose the fuel rail pressure sensor trap faking richness.